Hello again, everybody. This video is a short demonstration of how you can make a casting slip. Okay, what is casting slip? Casting slip is basically clay mud that has little amount of water in it, but it's liquid form that you can actually pour. Okay, so this is just clay, leftover clay, or from throwing clay or scrap clay. That the easiest way is to dry it out in the sun until it's completely dry, crush it up, like put a tarp around it and crush it up. Make sure the ventilation is good. You don't want to inhale any of the powder, the clay powder. It contains a lot of silica, which can cause silicosis, which is not a good thing, right? And no cure for it. So you always want to try to avoid inhaling clay dust. I'm not sure if this will work because usually I work with a slip that is more liquidy than this. Okay, this is very thick, but we'll try and we'll see. So basically, how to do that? How to make the clay more liquidy but has very little amount of water in it? You use sodium silicate or water glass in another name for it. It works by deflocculating the clay, which means that it makes the charges in the clay the same and thus repelling each other. So when it repels each other, it doesn't want to stick together and become liquid, even though it has very little water. If you just use regular clay and you slake it down with water until it's very liquidy, it wouldn't work for slip casting usually. It's just too much amount of water for the plaster to absorb. So by the time it starts drying, it's already cracking and stuff like that. I'm gonna try with that first. So that's like a few drops. You only need very little, so always work little and add little by little. Don't add too much, because once it's too much, you cannot turn back. You only have, the only option you have left is adding more clay, which is much harder to control. Okay, so just work by drops, you know, like 1-2 drops at a time. Add, mix, and try again. Add, mix, try again. See if it's already starting to change the clay enough to make the whole clay particle become liquidy. Okay, so this, but you have to mix it up really well. If not, some of them that didn't get the chance to change its charge won't be liquid. Okay, I think I can add some more here. That's a lot, but I'm working with very thick clay. You see that? So imagine if I'm doing this and I'm trying to make it liquid by just using water, I would need probably like half a glass of water, okay, or more. So this is, you can see it already, how the charges in the clay is making it kind of liquidy. Alright, so just keep mixing it some more. I'm not sure if this would work, but I think it will. Some people also use soda ash. So a little bit of soda ash and a little bit of sodium silicate. But I couldn't find my soda ash. So today I'm just trying to use if just the sodium silicate would work on it. Hopefully it will. You see that already? It is much more liquidy than before. So we'll try another heavy dose of those. Okay. If you add too much, you actually reverse the charge again. So if it's already too much, the clay doesn't repel each other anymore, and it start attracting each other again. Oh, you see that starting? Yes, it's working. So this way you can make a casting slip from any clay that you use. Yeah, any natural clay. I think I haven't tried it with paper clay or anything, any other synthetic clay. So that you have to try on your own and see if it works or not. But as long as the particle also works the same way, that it became plastic from the charged particle, attracting to each other, kind of. So the deflocculating, which changes the charge into same charge, and it will repel each other. It should work in theory. Just keep mushing it. The one that's like a clump clay, that's basically harder for the particle to be mixed with the sodium silicate and to actually become watery. So the faster way to do it is to mix the clay until like a cream cheese consistency, or very thick, like corn soup type of consistency, and then add like 2-3 drops of the sodium silicate and mix it and see if that would make it liquefy to a pourable stage. Mix it up really well, and then once you get this, you can screen it. Okay. That would remove some of the clumpy clay, so you get a better pour liquid casting slip to pour with. Any of the clumps, you can actually still use it. I mean, it's just basically you need to mix it up somewhere with maybe slightly water and a few more drops of the sodium silicate. It should all dissolve, okay? Unless it's sand or anything that's not clay, then you will be left with those things not dissolving. If it's still too thick after you mix the sodium silicate, you might be able to add a little bit of water, I think. Well, we'll know when we start casting. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, that means you still need to go back and try again with a different consistency of clay, different amount of water, play around with it, try it. Most industrial casting slip production, they usually look for clay that has a very small percentage of shrinkage. Okay, so they have less problem in casting the mold from its cracking and all that stuff. Clay in general, if it has a smaller amount of shrinkage, usually you have less problem from its shrinkage differences and not shrinking in a uniform manner. Okay, if it's not uniform manner, one part is shrinking, the other one is not, that is usually the cause of cracks and other imperfection. Okay, so this is still very, very thick. Okay, so that part you can just mix it up again, maybe add water. So this is the casting slip I'm working with. It's still kind of thick, so I'm gonna add a little bit of water maybe, just to help make it cast easier, better. What kind of consistency you want? You want like a flowing. When you pour, you can actually pour. Does these clumps matters? It will still cast, but your result of the casting might not be smooth if it's still clumpy. So they will remain like these clumps that are like sticking out, kind of bumpy in the clay. Okay, but if you fire it and all that stuff, it still works. It's just the appearance will be bumpy. So that's the consistency you want. What is a good casting slip? When you scoop it up and you do that, you see that? The trail is like a line instead of a drip. Right, just the beginning when you load it up, see that? With just normal slip, you wouldn't ever get that consistency. So it's always just gonna be blop, 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 right? It's not gonna be like stringy. So once you get that stringy, that's usually a sign that that you get a good casting slip. Okay, so if I want to remove all these clumps, I can actually screen it again, but I'm just gonna go ahead, all right? The plaster, this is a one-part casting plaster. It's if it's a one-part casting, the shape has to be so that it has no undercut, right? When the clay actually in there and it's drying, it can pop out. It has nothing to lock into there. Okay, so I'm just gonna start pouring this in here. Okay, we'll see it work. How it works is the mold has to be completely dry, right? The plaster mold, so it has to be made from plaster. Some plaster works better than others. Since I don't have enough, I'm gonna have to do this, rotate it to build up the thickness on the wall. If you have enough, you would be pouring it all the way till it's full. Wait for the minute. As soon as the longer you let it sit there, the more it'll absorb and build up the wall around it. So if you want a thicker cup for the result, you will want to let it sit in here longer. This you have to try. So in most cases, it's between about 5 minutes to 10 minutes. Okay. If you just leave it like solid like that, you never pour it out, you're gonna get eventually you're gonna get like a very solid clay that just dry up in the bottom, right? So you do want it. You need to pour it out eventually after it's built up enough thickness. So the clay is absorbing any of the little amount of water left on the slip and deposit some clay on the surface, and that's how it creates thickness. Okay. If you pour in and pour out, you're gonna get a very, very thin casting, right? Some people do that if you're using multicolor slip, and then you were carving, incising between layers. Okay, so I'm gonna let it sit there for maybe about 10 minutes. Then I'm gonna pour out the clay. Okay, hi again. While we're waiting for that one to build up, to get absorbed and build up thickness where the clay is, where the casting slip is in there, I'm going to show you another mold that I have. This is a factory made mold, so I bought it a long time ago. Right, it has two parts mold. Why is it 2 parts? Because of this, the design, right? It has undercuts. So when the clay is already drying, there's a clay wall here. You wouldn't be able to pop out because it's being locked by these undercuts, right? So it needs to be released in 2 parts. Okay, it has to be released first that way, and then the other way. And it also has a handle in the bottom. So once you've finished casting this way, you cast the other way to get the handle, and then pop them out when there's leather hard and attach them. Okay, so today I'm just gonna try to cast the cup form, not the handle. Okay, so usually the 2-part mold is like this. Either you tape it around it, or you buy a special rubber band that is harder, or anything like a string, whatever, that doesn't damage your plaster mold, but you can tie it securely so the casting slip will not leak out from the sides. A little bit of leakage is okay, but you don't want like a whole thing pouring out and making a mess everywhere. Okay, so that's tight, nice and tight. This is a casting slip that is made in factory. So it's a factory bought casting slip. So they already mix it up, which is usually means more consistent than the one that you try to make on your own. Okay, I have screened it, so it's nice and smooth right now. So I'm just gonna pour this in here. Make sure you stir the casting slip well before every time you use it. Okay. There you go. I don't have enough of this thing, so it's only gonna go to whatever amount height that it's going. And I'm gonna start my timer, and I'll wait for maybe about 10 minutes. I'll try to see 10 minutes and see what happens, if it's thick enough or not. You can tell how thick it is by tilting it, right? You can see it like that, and then you can tell how much clay it's building up on the side. This one, I'm not sure whether it's going to work or not. It doesn't seem to want to build up the clay, but we'll see. Okay, I'll go back after 10 minutes. Okay, hi again. It's been 10 minutes. So the one that's factory bought casting slip and plaster mold seems to work. Okay, you can actually see there what I'm talking about the thickness of the wall. You see that if I tilt it, there is on the wall itself some clay deposit already building up. So I'm gonna pour the rest here. That's kind of like the thickness that I want anyway. So you want it thicker wall, you can leave it even longer, right? 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. But I'm happy with this thickness. So you just pour out the rest. As you're pouring out, it's also gonna leave a mark where the pour is, but it's kind of slight, right? And when it's slightly hard, you can actually brush them off. Since I don't have enough slip, I'm gonna make a cup that's only that high. The rest I'm gonna wipe off or cut off later when it's slightly hard. So this is done. Usually in factory setting, they would dry it on the rack upside down, and it usually takes about maybe half a day to 1 day until it becomes slightly hard and hard enough for it to be able to be taken off the mold without distorting it. Okay, so I'm gonna just leave this. This is considered done. I might clean up all this later on when it starts to get leather hard, just to get a start with it. Okay. The other one that we made, the casting slip that we made, I'm not sure whether this will work, but yeah, it seems to be hardening up also. Okay. So I'm just gonna pour it out also. And same thing. So I'm just gonna let this sit. This might end up just like a little small plate. Okay, you see all that bumps there? That's what happened when your clay hasn't been screened properly, or the mix still have lumps in it. You'll end up with bumps like that. Okay. That can also be fixed when it's slightly hard. You kind of wipe it with a damp sponge to smooth it out again. All right. But anything that's like a spillover, you can actually just wipe them off with a damp sponge. To help with the cleanup later, so it's easier to demold. Throughout the 10 minutes that we were waiting, I've been brushing the clay inside to the wall to build up the thickness around the wall, but I think that's still way too thin, so it might not work. All right, if it works, it will be a very, very thin wall cup. All right, but the fact that it's building up inside, that means it works. So I just need to make more of this, pour it all the way top, and I don't have to worry about it. Just let it sit for like 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then pour out like that one, and it should work. The drying before you can demold will take, just now I said, about a day to like a whole day or the next day. All right, so I'm just gonna leave it. Okay, and that's basically what the casting is all about, right? How to make a casting slip, how to use molds, pour it in, wait for the wall to build up its thickness, and then pour it out. Hope you learned something. Thank you. In the description of this video, I'm gonna add other links of other people doing slip casting, so you can get either other viewpoints and other points that I might have missed. Okay. Hi again. This is additional footage of what happened if you want to try to pop it out much faster. You don't want to wait like all day or half a day for it to harden up. So I'm trying to use a heat gun to speed up the process of the drying. I don't recommend doing this, but if you are on a deadline and you're trying to cast faster, this might be an option. So I don't know whether it's going to work or not, but I'm going to try. All right. When you're heating up ceramics, always make sure you want to move around. Don't stay on one spot. Dry that spot, make it shrink, and the rest hasn't shrink yet. That would create the problem of it cracking and all that stuff. You see that? Right there on the edge is already, because I was pointing there way too long. Alright, so move around. Move around, move around. You want it to shrink together at the same time. Or you can like point at places where it's more wet than the others. So hopefully the part that's wetter will dry up also, and it can even out the drying and the shrinking. Alright. So like this, the bottom part is, I think it has the thickest clay, so that would dry the longest. So I'm pointing a lot of the heat to the bottom of that piece. Ooh, I already see a crack. So that's usually not a good thing for you to force anything in clay. That's when a lot of the cracking occurs and the failure. I have taken out the rubber band, but be careful that the clay inside is still very soft, so you don't want to like accidentally pop the two-part mold when it's still not ready yet and destroy the cast. But basically this is what you can do, right? And heat gun. But again, whenever you're forcing things, it might not work. So that's a detail of where forced drying with the hairdryer or a heat gun might, as long as it's not cracking all the way into the cup, it should be okay. All right, because that's just the excess clay that I was pouring out just now. So as long as the cup itself has no other cracks in it, it might still work. But then again, always slow drying is still the best. The other one don't seem to be working that well. All right. So also the gypsum that you're using for your mold matters. Some gypsum absorb water better. So it's better if you can buy a gypsum that's made for slip casting, right? But if not, the other option would be press molding. Okay, with press molding, it's just getting a plastic clay or a slab and pressing into the mold to cast the outer appearance, and just smoothing the inside, and you'll get the press molding. In factory setting, usually people prefer to do it this way because you can do a lot. You can finish works a lot faster. It's just a matter of having like 100 molds ready, pouring it all, and then popping it all, and you'll get 100 things done, and just finishing up, cleaning up, right? Press molding will take more time because you have to get the clay, you have to press it one by one. So most factory would prefer slip casting than press molding. But for somebody who's doing like more like a minimum small production, maybe like addition of 10, 5, specialized, more expensive things, press molding is still an option. Okay, so that you can keep that in mind. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes since I use a heat gun to help dry it up, and I try to touch the surface. It seems to be leather hard, so I'm gonna try to pop it up. You can see if it actually works. You kind of wiggle it a little bit like that, and then slowly pull it up. All right, that's quite clean. And there, it is still very soft. So whatever you're doing, do gently. Okay. There you go. It's not bad. This mold has damage. There was a chipping, so that's what happened. So things like this is kind of common. That's why you make a mother mold of the mother mold itself. You have to make it into silicone, or you made it so that the silicone is like a mother mold for the plaster, so you can keep making the same plaster that is perfect. All right, that's how you keep the quality of your casting the same and good all the time. So you have to maintain that the mold is always in a good condition. When it's already losing its detail or its shape and whatever, you have to cast a new plaster mold from the silicone mother, all right, from the master. All right, like things like this, you can later on clean up with a sponge and all that stuff. You can carve a little bit of that away, trim this and smooth it with a sponge, and you basically can make like hundreds of these, right? One by one, cast it. So in factory setting, they have a lot of molds, right? They make 100 molds. So one casting, you make 100 cups. So something that, let's say if you hand build and you try to make like 100 of this a day, you might be able to do it, but you'll be exhausted, and then you'll need like a few days or a week to recuperate from that, right? But once you invested and make 100 molds of this, a person can easily cast like 100, 200, 300 of these a day, right? Take it off, and then there's usually other people doing the cleanup and all that stuff. It's like a factory line in a factory setting. So you can imagine how easy and fast they can make some forms, right? Multiple of these forms, okay? But that's basically a good cast, okay?